vibe coding, where instead of writing the code, I'm going to tell the AI what I want the code to do and let it do what it does. And what you get back is not really what you wanted. It might be related to what you want, or it might be something different.
Vibe coding now with AI is the ability to describe what you want in the way that previously you might have talked to a coder or an engineer. So Rick Rubin, the great music producer, he is the vibe coder of music, right? He doesn't play instruments. He doesn't really even know how the little knobs work. When people talk about vibe coding, they mean like to do digitally what Rick Rubin does musically.
You might not even know why it works, but when you see it, there's some feeling of resonance with it. It's like, this makes no sense. And it's much more interesting than what I was asking for.
I got goosebumps about it. It was unreal.
Nothing is made in a vacuum. Everything is made based on everything that came before it.
This discussion about AI and its role in creativity and art.
That's the real creative experience. It is never
You not feeling well, though?
I'm okay. It's just a little jet laggy, time zone, didn't sleep so much, so I'm a little in space. But sometimes that makes for an interesting conversation.
It's always a tension, right? Like, do you push through it or do you respect it? And there's something kind of zen about that. It's easier in some ways, I think, to push through than to respect it.
Yeah, I think let's see what happens, and I'm unattached to what happens.
No, I mean, I actually think that's a good place to start. Like when I'm not feeling it creatively, that's always a debate I have. Do you go, today's not the day, I'm going to respect that I'm not feeling into it? Or is that the resistance and you have to push through it or you would never get anything done?
Yeah, I tend to show up regardless. And I'm often surprised by what happens. But it's all out of our control. And I'm just a passenger on the boat.
Well, maybe that's actually the way to think about it is you show up, but you don't have expectations.
Yeah.
Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't, but the part that you control is whether you show up or not.
Yeah, and sometimes we're surprised. Some days I show up expecting nothing and something really good happens, and sometimes I'm excited about something the night before and I show up and it doesn't really work out. And it has a life of its own. And I think the more we can respect it and show up and be present and see what happens.
Yeah. There's a story I have in Discipline is Destiny about Lou Gehrig. He sort of struggled as a rookie when he was in the minor leagues. And he's sort of getting in this kind of downward spiral where he's not performing well and he's down on himself. And the owner of the Yankees dispatches some manager out to see him. And the advice he gives him is he says that, the most important thing you can learn as a young baseball player is that you can't be good every day. And I think about that a lot. Like what matters is you show up. What matters is that you try. But if you think you're going to be flawless every single day, and if you think it's going to be magic every day, you're going to be disappointed. And actually that disappointment is going to prevent you from performing.
Yes, that sounds right.
I listened to this podcast the other day with John Mulaney, the comedian, on it. And he said something that I was curious to get your take on it. He was saying that having a family has allowed him to be more of a maniac in his work because he knows there's people at home that love him. And I think we have this sort of myth or this image of the artist as this kind of lone wolf or this, maniac, really, right? And we don't think about stability. We don't necessarily think about discipline or routine. We think about long nights. We think about disheveled clothes. We think about all that. But I do think there is something about creating order in your personal life or stability or support in your personal life that allows you a certain amount of creative freedom that perhaps you couldn't get on your own.
Absolutely. The more grounded we can be in our life, the more free we'll be in our art. and the more extreme it can get, which is usually where the most interesting things happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Some artist was talking about how you have to keep your workstation orderly so your work can be disorderly.
Yeah. I can see that. But
I imagine you have dealt with artists on the broad spectrum, some of which were actually totally disorganized and crazy, and sometimes good stuff comes from that too. And then you've probably seen this sort of more monkish, Spartan drill sergeant types.
Yeah, both exist, and there is no right way. I will say, in the long run, it's hard to keep it going if you're not taking care of yourself. Yeah. It's hard to sustain the long run.
Was that a transformation for you as you've done this longer and longer?
I've always been, I was never a partier. I never drank. I never smoked. I never took any drugs. I used to work late hours, but only out of passion and excitement. And I grew to learn over time that more time in the studio didn't make it better. Yeah. I didn't know that in the early days. I just thought the more I do, the better it'll be. And I came to see that after an 8-hour day or a 12-hour day or a 4-hour day, depending on where you are in your life, there's an amount that really is like you can focus and you can get a lot done. And then tomorrow will be much more productive if you don't go way past it the day before.
I've always wondered that about football coaches. They're always like, I get up at 3 a.m. and then I get to the practice facility. I always wondered if like part of the collective bargaining agreement, if like coaches had to keep banking hours, if we would notice any difference on the field, or if it's all just part of a kind of a narrative and a competition, it's a signal that you're serious, but it might not affect the product at all. And probably maybe even for musicians, it's like you want to show that you're in the studio late at night because it seems like that's a commitment to the art. But maybe commitment to the art is being a normal person and not a vampire. Like it could be totally different than we think.
Yeah, I think it's different for every artist, and they find their rhythm, and their rhythms change over time. Sometimes, in the early days, they work all night. In the early days, I worked all night. And then at some point, my schedule changed, and I like it.
Yeah, that's kind of coming into your own when you realize like all the affect and this is what it's supposed to look like when all that pressure goes away. And then you just do it the way that you like to do it, that is natural and productive for you. And you dispense with the pretense, basically, the performance part of the performing.
Mm-hmm. True.
Well, I really like this. I really like this new book. I was curious, what made you think about it not as a physical book, right? You're always, I think part of what you do is you push the boundaries of things. But what made you specifically go, no, this should be on a computer, not a thing that you hold?
It wasn't planned out at all. My original focus was the idea of writing a book. And it came, and I thought it's a book that I want to get done very quickly, which is very different than The Creative Act, which was an 8-year project. Sure. This was essentially an 8-week project. And I put all of I think of it as a joke project, started as a joke project, but I put all of my real projects aside to put all of my time and effort into the joke project, which was unusual for me. Yeah. Hadn't done that before, but it just felt like the right thing to do. It felt like timely in a way. I wanted it to exist in the world very quickly. And that also probably ended up playing a role in how it was released. So it got to the point where I finished the text and I was excited about the text, but I still didn't have any release plan. And I happened to interview Jack Clark, who's one of the 7 co-founders of Anthropic, for the Tetragrammaton podcast. And that episode actually just came out today. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, just incredible timing. But at the end of the interview, after we finished the interview, I said, I just wrote this thing. He was a journalist. He was a writer. So, and he's involved in AI. So I thought, I just finished this thing. Can you take a look at it? Tell me what you think. And he looked at it and he said, I really like this. And we have a big push coming in a few weeks for Anthropic, and maybe we can use this as part of our releases. My interest was to get it in front of people's eyes, and he said, I think we can help do that. So that's really how it happened.
It almost seems like something you might, like a thought exercise you might put a musician through, where you're like, instead of taking 8 years on this album, what would it look like if you only had 8 weeks?
Yeah.
And sometimes the constraints or the premise forces you to get outside your sort of normal way of doing things.
Absolutely. And it probably influenced the decision to do it related to the DAO. And when it got related to the DAO, it went from a joke project originally. And the joke was, I'm going to write a book about something I don't know anything about. That was the premise. It's like, okay, I don't know. The reason, there was a meme of me being associated with vibe coding. Yeah. I had nothing to do with that. It just happened. I was a bystander, and I keep getting friends sending me a picture of me associated with vibe coding. I didn't know what vibe coding was. And it felt like I was being enlisted into something. And so much of creativity is like looking at the things going on around you and then seeing how do I participate in this thing that I'm noticing? So in this case, the noticing was me being associated with vibe coding didn't make any sense to me, but it did to someone because thousands of images are coming up of me being associated with vibe coding.
What is vibe coding?
Vibe coding is, do you know what traditional coding is? Writing computer language, and it's a very exacting, specific, time-intensive, detail-oriented job where you'll write you want the computer to do something very simple, and you write thousands of lines of code to get it to do this simple thing. And it's both exhausting, difficult, and if there's a mistake anywhere in these thousands of computer speak, anywhere in these thousands of lines, then it won't work. And you don't know why. So it's difficult. And again, I don't really know anything about this. I just know that coding is difficult. That's as much as I know. And then this idea of vibe coding happened about 3 months ago, which was a very famous coder said, I've been experimenting with a new thing. I'll call it vibe coding, where instead of writing the code, and this is a guy who's an expert at writing code, decided I'm going to tell the AI what I want the code to do and let it do what it does. And it does it, and what you get back is not really what you wanted. It might be related to what you want. It might be a bad version, or it might be something different, completely different. But he found that what he was getting back was interesting enough that he could then give it modifications, also like vibe coding on top of vibe coding, to get it to do what he wanted it to do. So instead of writing thousands of lines, he says a few words to a computer. It gives him feedback, a mock-up, let's say. He looks at the mock-up and says, okay, now try it like this. And then it gives him a new iteration. So that's what vibe coding is. And I believe the reason I became associated with it in the hive mind was I'm the record producer who doesn't know anything about music. So he's talking about being a coder without knowing anything about coding.
Well, it's interesting what radically different skill sets those are, right? The first is the equivalent of being an architect and an engineer and a contractor. You're building something from scratch. Then the others feels much more like a humanities-based approach of like, hey, how can I describe what I'm after? What are the analogies and metaphors, and how can I paint a picture of the direction I'd like to go in? And then it has this other thing, which maybe we don't think of as a skill, but a kind of a detachment or an openness to spontaneity that is the ability to call and respond and improvise based on what you get.
Yeah, and it's very much in tune with what happens in the recording studio, because we may go in with an idea, but very quickly through experimentation, it takes on a new form. We're very rarely directing. We may start with a direction, but then based on what we get back, we change direction, often radically.
Yes.
And we may do 10 different versions, like, let's try it faster, let's try it slower, let's try it in a different time signature, let's try it in a different key. Let's see what's it like if the chorus becomes the intro? What's it like if the bridge, if we take the bridge out of the song, how does that change it?
Yeah.
Like all of those things are normal things for us to try. What's it like if we program the drums instead of having a live drummer? What's it like if it's all electronic? What's it like if it's all wind instruments? What's it like if it's all string instruments? You know, there are a million versions. What's it like if it's only sung, if there's only vocals? You know, it's so that those what would happen if are the same things that happen in vibe coding. What would happen if...
Yeah, that's a prompt.
It's a prompt. It's a series of prompts.
Try it this way. Yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny because people think of Stoicism as this very rigid philosophy, and I think it is rigid internally, right? Philosophy, Stoicism is saying, hey, I said I'm going to get up at this time, so I'm going to get up at this time. These are the standards I hold myself to. But it is funny when you read the Stoics more in depth, that there is a sort of a Taoism running through it. There's a lot about acceptance. There's a lot about flexibility. There's a lot about, one of my favorite passages from Meditations is where Marcus Aurelius is talking about how he says, you want to be able to get to the place and go, this is just what I was looking for. That's what you want to be able to say. But of course, you actually weren't looking for it because you weren't thinking about it at all. And I think the creative process and life is about, I have this idea, I'm going to start the process, I'm going to try it, and then actually being able to sort of go, actually, I can work with that. The ability to work with things and to take what happens and use it and respond to it and then start this kind of feedback loop. That's really what it's about creatively, and I think just being a person in an unpredictable world.
Yeah, and I think when we start a project, it starts with a prompt, but it doesn't start with the final version. It starts with an idea of what it might be. And then through experimentation, what it wants to be reveals itself to us.
Yeah.
And we're surprised by it and thrilled by it when it happens. It's a magical feeling when you're aiming for, you think you're aiming for this one thing and you end up in this whole other place, and it's much more beautiful than your original idea.
Well, in both Eastern and Western philosophy, and then you could sort of put Christianity in there too, they both have some version of this idea of the way, right? And the Stoics call this the logos, which is the word in Christianity, but it just means the way. It connects to what you're just saying, which is like, there's something in here that's not us, that's actually choosing where this is going or what it will be.
Yes.
We have the idea, we start it, but the song reveals itself. That is the weird thing. You sit down to write, and then you're like, where's this coming from? How is it heading towards a direction? You're partly in control of it, and yet there is an otherworldliness to it.
Yeah, and you might come in contact with clues along the way where you're working on something and you get stuck and it's impenetrable, there's nothing you can do, and then you go out for a walk and someone says to you exactly the thing that you were having the problem with,
yes.
Or you overhear someone say something related, or you read something and it's like, it's unbelievable how specific the information coming at us is when
yes.
we're really open and paying attention to it. It's coming from all directions at all times.
Well, I think it was Aristotle who said that's one of the paradoxes of knowledge. It might have been Plato, which is like, how can you know that that's what you're looking for if you've never found it before? Like there's something paradoxical about discovery and creation. You're finding something and you're recognizing it, and yet it's new to you. And so that's why the ancients often thought there was such a thing as the muses. It was like, that was an easy way to solve this impossible riddle of like, where did this come from and why does it feel right?
Yeah. And imagine going somewhere that you've never been before. And I'm sure you've had this experience in both directions. You go somewhere you've never been before and you get there and you think, wow, this is the greatest place I've ever been. I don't want to leave. I have this experience sometimes. And then there are other places where I've never been and I go there and I feel like this place is making my skin crawl. I can't wait to get out of here. And I don't know why. I don't know what's different about these places. This happened to me recently in 2 different cities in the same country. I went to 2 different cities. And in one city, I got to this city and I felt like, I feel this place. I could stay here. And then I went to another city in the same country and I felt like, I can't wait to get out of here. I have no business in this place. Just energetically, it felt wrong.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I can't explain it.
Right. And when something you're making or something you're consuming, when it speaks to you, you're like, why is, that goes to this idea of vibe. Like, why is the vibe right and why is the vibe wrong? You drive yourself insane trying to explain it. But at some level, and I think that's the idea of like the way or the universe. It just is. And you're kind of in that rhythm or you're not.
Yeah.
You're vibing or you're not. It was interesting looking through the book because I've always had this theory that what's interesting about physical books is what a remarkable piece of technology they are, right? That like for thousands of years, we've basically been consuming long form information the exact same way. And that an ebook is obviously superior, an audiobook is obviously superior, doing it in this interactive way on the computer is superior, and that it's auto-generating, new graphics or whatever. And yet there is something that endures about the book. And it struck me that that's kind of true in music too. Like there's no reason that songs have to be 3 minutes. There's no reason that albums have to have 10 to 15 songs on them. And yet, or that a TV show needs to be roughly 30 minutes. It's interesting how the constraints often start for a technological or a commercial reason, and yet they endure long after they have any real necessity.
Yeah, and for no reason. And I wouldn't say that I prefer one format over another. I would say I listen to more books. I listen to more audiobooks now than read because I like to be outside and walking. And sure. I'll crash if I'm reading while I'm walking, or I might crash.
Your introduction into the Tao, you were in a bookstore and you found this book and it changed the course of your life. There's something about that technology too.
Yeah, no, I love bookstores. I've spent much time of my life hanging out in bookstores. Some of my favorite places to be.
What do you think drew you to this? Like, what was it about that copy? Because you acknowledge it in the epigraph of the book, basically.
Yeah.
What spoke to you about what? Like, I'm so fascinated in the books that change our life. Again, how did we know that that's the one we should grab off the shelf? What is it that spoke to me about meditations or you about the Tao? Like, there's something otherworldly again about why we find the right book at the right time.
I probably picked up most of the books on the new release table that day, and it was a spiritual bookstore, so it tended towards that type of material. And I would probably go to that store 3 days a week, and for a couple of hours. I also like the energy in the store beyond the actual book shopping. The feeling of being in the store around all this wisdom felt good to me.
And was it an immediate sort of revelation when you read it, or was it a book that sat around for a while and you slowly came to understand it?
It was a book that spoke to me immediately, and I bought many copies and gave it to many of my friends. And then maybe a year later, I read it for the second time. And that was the first time I realized, it's a different book. This is not the book I read a year ago, and have read it many times. I usually have a copy of it in my travel bag. And then over the years, read many different translations. And it's just a book that has continued to spark my imagination.
Well, Heraclitus had this idea that we don't step in the same river twice.
Yeah.
And there is something beautiful about coming back to a book and realizing not that you missed anything the first time,
No.
but there was just a whole other level beneath or above. And then the magic of going, oh, this is true the third time and the fourth time. And like to have those texts that you go to over and over and over again and find that they continue to reveal yourself is, again, a very magical thing.
I think it has to do with the nature of the writing being so open and poetic that the reader brings so much to the material. And as we change in our life, the material changes. It's not really what's changing. We're what's changing. Yes. But it's written in a way to highlight our changes.
Yes.
And it was something that I set out. I can't remember if I told you this when I first started working on the Creative Act, but it was one of the things I hoped would happen. One of the things I wanted the Creative Act to do was to be a book that if you read it and you read it at another point in your life, you'd get something different from it, to be written in an open enough style for that to happen.
Yes, if it's too specific, it can't become general. And yet, if it's so general, it's meaningless. And so they obviously were writing them in response to very specific problems or specific scenarios or sort of human vices. And so it's out of that specificity that it's clearly resonating. And yet they're not just coming out and saying what they mean. So there's room for endless interpretation, because also, the truth of an idea. I think there was something about Confucius once where he said one thing to one brother and then something else to another brother. And someone said, but this is a contradiction. What are you doing? And he's like, well, he needs this advice and he needs that advice.
Yeah.
And that seems very basic, but for some reason we struggle with the idea that you're going to need different truths at different times in your life.
Yeah. And I think the fact that something written 3,000 years ago is as prescient today as it was when it was written, that's interesting to me.
Oh, I find that endlessly fascinating. The idea that this was an ancient text to ancient peoples. Like it occurred to me that Stoicism was 500 years old by the time Marcus Aurelius gets to it.
Yeah.
So like we think of for some reason we compress that ancient period all down into one thing. And, they were reading texts that were as old to them as Shakespeare is to us. And so to them, it contained ancient wisdom and was talking about a world that they missed and romanticized, just as we ourselves are doing to them. And so there's a reason that it resonated with each subsequent generation. And that's why it's not like it was lost for 2,000 years and then we just discovered it and we're like, oh, how cool is this? It's actually been both ancient and relevant for every one of those thousands of years.
Yeah, it's like the Bible. And the Bible the stories of the Bible existed for hundreds, if not thousands of years before the Bible was written.
Right.
Before there was writing.
Musically, a bunch of parents I know have been talking about this, like the world of Spotify has changed our children's interaction with music, which is they don't understand that these are not new songs.
Yeah.
That because the primary means of hearing new music is not the radio, which has a bias towards new music. They're hearing stuff for the first time and they don't have any of the context of whether this is new or disruptive or old and not cool. Like it's interesting to watch like kids in the bookstore listen to bands like Nickelback or Puddle of Mud, bands that I remember as a kid having a certain reputation, whether it was cool or not cool. And to them, it's just music.
Yeah.
And so that in a way, stripping that context out allows you to perceive it in a new kind of earnest way without the self-consciousness.
I think that's a good rule in life, is to find a way to let go of any self-consciousness with anything that you're engaging with to see how you truly feel about it. Because all of the whatever's said about something has such a big effect on us, this like groupthink idea, that it leaves us not knowing our own taste. So one of the things that in the creative act I talk about a lot is that developing and knowing your taste, both when it's in sync with other people and when it's against other people, and to hold firm on your taste, because that's your, as an artist, that's what you have to offer.
Yes.
You know, if all you're doing is regurgitating what is the popular thing now, there's no reason for you to exist. It already is.
Yeah, sure.
The only thing you have to bring is a new perspective. And it's only a new perspective because everyone else is not doing that.
Yeah, you are unique. And then for some reason, you try to be like everyone else. There's this Stoic named Chrysippus. We hear this story about him where someone says, you know, he's living in the time of Nero, which obviously would have been a time of conformity and danger. You don't want to stand out. And he's sort of asking him why he does. And he says, you know, most threads in the garment have to be white, but I want to be the red thread that makes the garment beautiful. And the idea that we each are totally unique, have a totally unique perspective, have totally unique experience, that is the one thing that we bring to the table creatively, entrepreneurially, in a relationship. And then for some reason, that's like the first thing that we throw away in favor of like what everyone else is doing or how it should or is supposed to be.
Yeah. And when I say bringing something new, it only means new to us. So you have built a career on very old information, but it was not in the mainstream at the time that you talked about it. So you essentially revived something. Same is true with Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan revived the style. Like we think of folk music as from Bob Dylan's time. It was already a revival of something that was 100 years before that.
Yeah, there's that term Columbusing, where you discover something that already exists. But to be able to do that earnestly as an artist or as a human being, to be like, this is exciting to me, this lights me up, and then to kind of become an evangelist or an interpreter of that thing. That's what it's all about. Because although you are discovering something that already exists, your interpretation and your understanding and your presentation of it, that's a fundamentally new and one-of-a-kind combination that can never be created again. And
you're talking about it in the context of today, whereas it was written in the context of a very different day.
I was curious your experience. As you said, you read the Tao Te Ching and you loved it, and then you read it over and over again, and then you read different translations. That's a really interesting experience too, because you go, I know this text, I love this text, and then you read somebody else's version of it and you go, this is a totally different thing. And then if you're not someone who knows a bunch of different languages, it was sort of a revelation to me to go, oh, I didn't know the translators had so much say. I didn't know the era in which the translator was existing. I just thought English was English. And then I go, oh, wait, somebody translating something from Latin or Greek in the 19th century is going to present it in 19th century Victorian English. And that's not going to feel super accessible or relatable to me. Although at the time, it might have felt totally groundbreaking and available to the common person. And so you go, oh, there's a lot of interpretation of the text itself, but then even in the translation, they're making all these artistic choices.
Yes. And regardless of whether it's a 3,000-year-old text that we're reinterpreting or something we noticed yesterday that we're explaining, or a comedian who does a joke about Starbucks.
Sure.
It's funny because the comedian is recognizing something we've all recognized, but we haven't said it.
Yes.
Or we haven't, while we know it to be true, we never found it important enough to single out and say, isn't it strange that this happens in this place? That's how comedy works. And that's how really all art is essentially. It's like when Duchamp showed the urinal as a sculpture.
Yeah.
It was a radical idea.
Yeah, Emerson said that we see a kind of alienated majesty in a work of art that we recognize as an idea we have also had, but failed to pursue. Like when you see, oh, I could have done that, or, oh, I've had that thought before. Yeah, when you hear a comedian tell a joke about something you've noticed yourself, but you didn't sketch out enough to turn into this hilarious observation, you're both laughing at it, but there is also kind of I think to me that there's a call to action in that of like, you should be pursuing your own creativity this way too. They're not a superhero. They're doing something you're capable of doing also.
Yes, they're paying attention to the world around them. And we all have all of these data points coming at us all the time, and we can choose to live on the surface, or we can choose to look deeper and try to see what's going on behind this. Why is this thing this color? How did that happen? Why?
Yeah, and the idea of translation or interpretation, we tend to think of that as either a professional philosopher or whatever discerning some, complex text, or somebody who knows two languages transferring from one to the other. But obviously, Johnny Cash covering Trent Reznor is a translation, and it becomes something totally different, even though the lyrics are the same or the notes are the same. You realize, oh, this person noticed, even though this thing is popular and millions of people have heard it, somehow this person noticed something totally new in it, or reflected back something that was always there, but wasn't the primary emphasis, because their own experience connected with that little piece and remade the whole as a result.
Yes. When you're looking at something obvious through new eyes and can shed light on the ordinary, where you see it in a new way, and you can share that experience so other people get to see it in a new way. That's ultimately what everything is. Like, all songs are essentially, the language of music has been the same since Bach, since before Bach. So it's the same notes in often this roughly the same order, but finding a new way to interpret it, to represent it in a way that you haven't heard it before. When I say a way that you haven't heard it before, it doesn't mean a way that no one's heard it before. It might be a way that many people have heard it before. Yeah. But for some reason right now, it feels good. It also happens where you'll see a movie, or I'll see a movie, and it doesn't speak to me at all. And then for some reason, I see it 20 years later, and I love it. And I didn't have that feeling the first time I saw it all, or the opposite, where you really love something at one point in your life, and then you come back to it later. It's like, I don't remember it being like this at all. Doesn't make me feel the same way at all.
Yes. Yeah. Having kids, like the things that you watched before you had kids, things you consumed after you had kids, you're just like, oh, apparently there was just a huge part of me that was not accessible before, or there's a sensitivity now, or an openness to a set of experiences that I didn't know was there. And you realize, oh, there's these other levels that this thing is operating on. The other experience is you watch a movie with your kids, like we've gone to see the Minecraft movie like 5 times, and like, they're laughing at it at one level, and I'm laughing at it another, because I see the filmmaker who also made Napoleon Dynamite and Nacho Libre is referencing things from his previous works. And, if you haven't seen those things, you're not going to get those references. And the ability, I think, to be a person who has a basis in a certain art form, there's just all these homages and allusions and connections that you couldn't make if you have only a surface level understanding. But the more in depth you go, the more is revealed and the deeper the experience. The thing about AI, I was curious your thoughts, because I do this thing when I read a book that I like, I take all the quotes that I like and I type them up, and I usually print them out. So I have to type them up in something. So sometimes I'll open up Gmail and I'll be typing the quote. And, Gmail has always had this sort of form of AI where it kind of, or has long had it, where it predicts what it thinks you're going to say at the end of like it's trying to help you. You're writing thanks or thank, and it's like, oh, you probably want to end this with you. So I've always had this interesting experience with AI because oftentimes I'll be writing something that, unlike a normal sentence, there is a right answer here. Like this is a famous quote from Hemingway that I'm typing. I don't want to say the best way to end this sentence is how he did it, but there is a direction that this could go. And I've always found it fascinating that Gmail or AI, Google's AI or whatever it is never making the same choice that Hemingway made or that the biographer I'm writing made. It's been this interesting insight into how the technology is working, because unlike a normal sentence that I guess could go in any direction, I'm trying to see if it lines up. And I can't tell if it's an indictment of the AI that it doesn't, or in fact, it's sort of an artistic observation that you can still go an infinite number of directions with any.
Well, I think it speaks to the genius of Hemingway. It's like the fact that the predictive text is not following Hemingway tells you that's why Hemingway is special. Now, it also could tell you why Hemingway is incoherent if it was. Do you know what I'm saying? It could go either way. It's either, all we know is it's not normal. So it's not normal could be bad, and it's not normal could be great.
Yes, or that even the best stuff can still be improved, or someone can take a different spin on it, right? And I'm sure that the first way that Hemingway wrote that sentence was probably not the way that it ended up.
Tell me about how you read. Do you underline? Do you highlight?
Yeah, I underline, fold pages. I'm marking stuff, and then I go back to that after I let the book sit for a little bit, and then I go back and I transfer the important stuff out of it. It was interesting. Actually, Billy noticed this. Our mutual researcher. One of my favorite biographies ever is this book called The Fish That Ate the Whale by Rich Cohen, which is about Samuel Zemurray, one of the founders of United Fruit. So I first read the book, 15 years ago. I really liked it. I've written about it, talked about it. I needed to reread it for something, and I didn't have my copy, so I just grabbed a new one off the shelf of my bookstore because it's one of the books we carry. Anyways, I read it again, and I had it out on my desk, and Billy noticed that on one page, I had marked the same set of passages and underlined the same things, but on two separate copies. So it was interesting that 15 years apart, the same thing is speaking to me. And yet, when I look at, my copy of Meditations, I can see all these different pens and highlighters and stuff over the years. Obviously, the copy's starting to fall apart. But it's interesting to me to notice that totally different things spoke to me over different periods of time. Yeah. But yeah, mostly I read and take notes. And then to me, it's the process of removing it so I can use that as the building blocks for my other stuff that's important. And mostly why I don't do ebooks or audiobooks is that process is less laborious in some cases or impossible in other cases. And I don't get the feeling of engaging with it that I do when I'm typing out a passage or writing it by hand.
Happened to me this morning. I was listening to an audiobook on my walk, and a passage came, and I thought, boy, I would really love to highlight this. Now, that said, I don't highlight when I read, and I don't underline. I have this... I treat books as holy objects, and I feel like I don't want to fold a page down. Like, I'll use a bookmark to hold my page, but I don't damage the books.
Oh, I beat the crap out of books. And sometimes I find like a really old or a rare book. And sometimes I'll hear about a book. It won't be in print anymore. So I'll put it up on Amazon. It'll be $20. It'll be $200, and it'll come, and it'll turn out it's an old book that's like, it's like, okay, this book I'm holding in my hands, it's survived 100 years. It's still flawless, but I need to use it. And I have to make this ethical decision of like, am I going to put it through the same ringer that I normally put a book through? But to me, I actually think treating the way you treat a book like a holy object is to use it as a book. Like sometimes people will come up to me and go like, can you sign my book? It's my absolute favorite book. I love it so much. And when I'm looking at it, it doesn't feel like it's your favorite book because like it looks like it's been on the shelf in a museum. Like I feel like the way you respect a book is by giving it attention and integrating it into your life. And my life is messy, and my dog has got it in his mouth, and my kids are spilling stuff on it, and it bounced around in my bag and fell on the seat of my car. I don't know though. That's interesting that you sort of keep them pristine.
Do you read every book that way, or only the books related to work? Or do you only read books related to work?
No. I mean, I feel like every book is work in that it informs what I do. Mm-hmm. Like there's no casual reading for me in the sense that I'm not learning something. And I often find, some novel that somebody recommended or that I heard about, I'm not looking for anything, but I'll find something in it. To me, though, a sign of a book not being good is that I didn't mark anything. And that might have just meant that I marked a beautiful sentence or a cool little illustration or graphic or how it was formatted. I just think there's always something that you can admire and like. If the book, when I hold it up, it doesn't have any pages folded on it, or I haven't spilled any food on it, that's probably a sign that I didn't engage in it very deeply.
I haven't really gone down this rabbit hole yet, but I do believe there's a way to engage in audio material in that same way, where you can take notes and make clips and save sections. I just don't know how to do it technically, but I think it's possible.
I was just reading about someone that says, they listen to an audiobook or they read a book and then they have like ChatGPT or whatever, they have a discussion with them about it. Like they have kind of a personalized book club about everything they read, which I thought was interesting because, sometimes I would love to discuss things with people, but I'm afraid I might be the only person that's currently read that book. Or, it's like you watch a movie. Jim Gaffigan has a joke about, being like, hey, has anyone seen the movie Heat? It's like you missed your window. Like nobody wants to talk to you about it.
Yeah.
And I think that AI might allow us to kind of do deep dives into stuff that, or like one of the things about book clubs is like nobody wants to admit that they didn't know what the fuck was happening. And like I've used ChatGPT all the time to be like, now, who is this person again? Or like, what is happening? Like I use it to break the thing open to understand what's happening. If it's, I don't have any shame about admitting that something went over my head.
Yeah, I don't understand most things, honestly. So I need all the help I can get. I read slowly and I reread, and I'm just looking for any little bit of help I can get.
Totally. And then I go like, give me articles about this. Tell me other things I should, like what I love to do, a sign to me that I like something is that I want to go down a rabbit hole. I want to read the author's obituary, and I want to read critics tearing them apart, and I want to hear about who influenced that. Like I love reading a book and then going like, I really hope the Paris Review did like a huge, retrospective on this person. And I want to find all that stuff out about it. And I think musically that's exciting too. When you go like, you find something and you're like, I want to find the influences that made this thing.
Always going back, seeing, and it's true with everything. Nothing is made in a vacuum. Everything is made based on everything that came before it.
And also, if you're depending on when you're finding something, what's the things that came after, right? The world was never the same after certain albums or certain songs. And so what's all the cool shit that's related to this that you didn't also know existed? Because again, it's not on the radio right now.
Yeah.
What have you found when you've used like AI to do stuff? One of the things I think that humans are better at, like if I'm like, hey, as I use it, for instance, I do a lot of talks. So I'll be making a point, and I find that when you can illustrate that point, it really resonates with people. So they're hearing something and seeing it. So if I'm telling a story about Zeno's shipwreck, the founder of Stoicism, I want to show a picture of, a person suffering a shipwreck at that time. And then I'll go like, make it like a Delacroix painting or a Caravaggio. I'll pick an artist that didn't paint that and I'll do it in that style. So you're kind of, anyways, I do that. But one of the things that I find is that although AI can do really good at like making something that didn't exist for the first time. And then I'm like, hey, this is weird, but Socrates has glasses on in this picture. Please remove the glasses, right? It'll either do the whole thing over and lose the magic of what it made, or it'll give me a new version and now fucking everyone has glasses on, right? It's like human. I find that it struggles to take direction and iterate. Like it's an interesting artistic medium in which it can only make a new thing each time. It can't tweak the thing that it made last time because it doesn't know what it did because it didn't consciously do it.
Yeah. I think there are versions coming now that will be able to do that. But who knows that that'll be better? There's something about that where it makes an unexpected choice and you get to see something new and interesting that you would never ask for. But when it's presented to you, it may have some validity that works on some other level. You might not even know why it works. But when you see it, there's some feeling of resonance with it. It's like, this makes no sense. And it's much more interesting than what I was asking for.
Yeah, or you hate it and it forces you to go, okay, now I have to take the same prompt as last time and specifically say, don't make this choice. So it's this process of, you try something and then you see the deficiency in your vision and you have to articulate your vision more concretely. You have to go, hey, it needs to be wider, it needs to be zoomed out, or I don't want to see this, or, there has to be more than, 3 of this in there. And so it's this process of refining what you're asking for in light of the trial and error of what you're seeing, which is, I think people who are sort of snobs aren't understanding that is itself an artistic and creative experience.
That's the whole creative experience.
Yes.
That's the real creative experience. It is never, I have an idea and I execute it to match exactly what my initial idea was. Almost never. 99% out of the time, that is not the case.
I mean, look, you write a book and then you spend more time cutting stuff out of the book than you put in it. And that was your vision. You made all of it. And then you're doing this process of, you're like, what is this garbage? Right? You're getting, like, that is the creative process, is trying and then refining and redoing and removing and adding back in. There is no, it's not this stream of consciousness published thing. It never has been.
There's also something interesting about, like, let's say there's a book of yours that I love and I've read it several times. If I could read the long version, that's 3 times longer, maybe overall it's not as tight or not as good, but I'm sure in that 2/3 that got cut out, there's some thoughts there that would be really helpful to me and I'd be interested in.
Yes, right. Because most of the time you're making something and you're like, I hope people will like this. I hope they'll be interested in it. But you don't know.
You never know. When
you get the truth that they did like it, well, then, it might be like they want more of it. Like Taylor Swift, when she redid all her albums, there's like a 5-minute version of All Too Well, and it's a fan favorite. And then when she re-recorded, it's like a 10-minute version because she knows the audience will indulge some of the things that if you were being much more ruthless or you were coming from a place of insecurity, you're not going to include it. Like you're petrified you're going to lose the audience's attention. And that governs a lot of the creative choices we make. But once you know you have the attention, like Robert Caro famously cut 250,000 words out of The Power Broker, his book about Robert Moses, which is itself over a 1,000 pages.
Yeah.
But like, I would read those 250,000 words as its own book right now.
Yeah. But the same, like we get director's cuts of movies, or we get expanded versions of albums, deluxe versions of albums where you'll hear all the songs that were recorded during that session that didn't make the album. I love those experiences. I love anything that I'm interested in, I want more of.
Yes. Well, we talked about Hemingway in A Farewell to Arms. He rewrote the ending like 35 times. And each one of the endings is pretty fucking good, And the edition that when I read it for the first time, at the end, they had all the other endings. And there was something magical about going, okay, this time he really lays it out. This time he holds more back. This time he really meditates and ruminates on what it means. But it's all like, I can't now tell you exactly how that book ends because I've read all the different endings and they all blurred together in a way that probably listening to a recording session would inform an understanding of a song, and you'd be unable to separate it from whatever the radio edit of the track ultimately ended up being.
It's also, if you see a photograph that's a really iconic photograph, and all you know is that image, but then you get to see the session of all the images that were taken on that day around that image, and you see the same iconic clothing and location, except now it's a different pose or a different. It's wild. It's wild because these things are burned into our memory in one way, and to take them out of that the amber version and see them come to life is very exciting.
And that goes to the Duchamp thing we were talking about, and also to me settles some of this discussion about AI and its role in creativity and art. You realize when you take an iconic photograph and you see the other versions, when you listen to the Nebraska version of Born in the USA instead of the pop version of it, you go, oh, the art is the choice. Ultimately it's the choice, what to leave in, what to leave out, what version to go with, what filter to put on it, to say this is the art and this is the refuse of the art. That's the whole fucking game. Art is the choice that you make when you ultimately decide to ship the thing.
It's true.
But it doesn't feel that way because it feels like cheating to type something into a computer and say, make me this, and then go, here it is. People go, oh, that's cheating. But actually, if you spent 50 iterations making the prompt, and then you changed the border and the whatever, and then you decided when it came out, and then you wrote the caption, all of those are artistic choices that are accumulating into a choice.
Same thing. It's the same as if you write the same paragraph over and over again, or if you ask the AI to write it over and over again. It's really no different.
At the same time, I don't let it do any writing for me.
What AI do you use for your images?
I use ChatGPT, and then we use it for like videos too. It has a thing where you can, like, I'll take a scene from one of my books and I'll say, I'll just put that in. I'll be like, give me a video. And it can give me a 5-second, a 10-second video. It can bring to life something that I imagined based on, a bunch of historical sources. That's a magical experience, as I'm sure it is to watch Steven Spielberg do it to a book that you wrote.
Yeah. No, it's amazing.
I had one other weird one I think you would like. So I wrote this book with this guy named George Raveling, who's one of my heroes. And he was an orphan. And so in 1950, he's basically saved by this Catholic priest named Father Nadine, who is also Black and a basketball player. He sees something in this like lanky teenager, and he gets him into a boarding school, which gets him into Villanova, which gets him into coaching, and he becomes one of the sort of all-time greats. He's in the Basketball Hall of Fame. I was writing about this guy, Father Nadine, and he didn't have any pictures of him. This guy who so changes the course of his life, he didn't have any pictures of him. But I said, describe him to me, like tell me all about him. And so he tells me all about him, and I put all this into ChatGPT and then I go, okay, this is 1950s Brooklyn. That's where he was a priest. Here's some photos of other priests. Like, show me what this guy looks like. Show me a Black Catholic priest in 1950. And it kicks it back out. And I send it to George, who's in his late 80s. And he goes, where did you find this picture? I've never seen this one. And I had to be like, this isn't real. This is ChatGPT. This is artificial intelligence. And he was like, it's real, Yeah. And the magic of it being able to resuscitate or revivify something based only on someone's memory. I got goosebumps about it. It was unreal.
It's amazing that the meme that led to the way of code was an image of me that I'd never seen before. So considering it was about AI and it was an image I never saw when I first saw it, it's like, oh, this is an AI image of me. And then it took a while, but eventually after seeing it over and over and over again, I started looking around what else was in the image, and I could see behind me there was a person with a name tag. And it's like, oh. And I realized I'd never seen the picture, but that was a real place and I was really there.
Wow.
I just never seen it. It was years ago.
Wow. Yeah. And that's a kind of magic too, right?
Absolutely.
Like somebody, and you imagine how magical that would have been to someone in the 1830s when photography as a medium is coming into being. And there were people who hated it and thought it was capturing their souls or that it would steal something from us. But it also gives us, experiences like that.
Yeah. And it also may capture our souls and it may steal something from us. Like, we don't really know.
Sure.
We take it for granted.
And perhaps that portrait that you got painted is doing the exact same thing.
Yeah. We don't know.
Right. How would we know? There's a fine line in art where you go, if I explore this much further, I might be getting too far out there. I don't want to explore that. You know what I mean? Where you're just like, do I actually believe in muses that come down and visit me if I say the right incantation before I write? Or is it actually healthier for me to believe in discipline? Like, sometimes my wife will ask me questions. Like, she was like, so when you're reading, are you saying the words out loud to yourself in your head? And I'm like, let's not get in our head about what's in our head, because it might fuck with things.
I tend to read out loud to myself silently.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do, and I might do that, but it's currently working, and I don't want to think about it.
But maybe if you analyze it, maybe there's an even better way that you haven't tapped into yet.
That's true. I mean, when golfers decide to reinvent their swing, it's both beautiful and extremely ugly. And sometimes they make it out the other side, and sometimes they don't.
I had that experience with swimming. I swam my whole life. I grew up in a beach town, grew up in the ocean, swam my whole life, and then maybe 12 years ago, I learned a different way of swimming. And it was one of the hardest things I ever learned, because it's just the muscle memory of the way you do something since childhood. You're like learning to walk differently than the way that you naturally learn to walk. And if you had to think about it, how difficult that would be. And the fact that you're in the water, you're weightless, so you don't have as much, like when you're walking and you think about changing your gait, you have the support of gravity to bounce off of. When you're floating in water, it's already an unusual relationship to your surroundings always when you're swimming.
Yeah.
So to intentionally put your body in a different position than the natural way you've always done it is super difficult. And it took a long time, but coming out the other end after, months of practice, I can swim much further with far fewer strokes in a much more effortless way, and just sort of glide through the water in a way that before it was more of a fight.
I've been thinking about that because I swim and swam as a kid. I swim all the time. I somehow at some point I lost the ability to easily breathe on my right side. I only do it on this side. And I know I need to take the time to figure it out.
Yeah.
Because it would make me better. It'd allow me, give me more endurance. And then also it's just whenever you're struggling with something or it's hard, you should probably go towards that thing instead of just, compensating for it. There's a passage in Meditations where Mark Aurelius talks about holding the reins in his non-dominant hand. Basically just like the way that it's easy for you to do, you should sometimes instinctively go like, I want to figure it out the hard way. That's a good skill to learn. And I know I need to do that as a swimmer, but I've been putting it off. So that's a nice reminder.
I think that's also nice if you're learning any new skill, to learn it in an ambidextrous way, which is really hard to do, but the benefits are tremendous. And like if you could swing a golf, I don't play golf, but if you could swing a golf club in both directions, it would probably be much healthier on your body to not always be doing it in one direction.
Anytime you're doing a repetitive action, there's a fundamental imbalance. Swimming is weird too, because like there's not really a reason that we should swim or know how to swim. Like there's this one theory called like the aquatic ape hypothesis or something, but like swimming is this thing we invented, and it's weird. But then you're doing it and you're like, this is the most natural thing that a human could possibly be doing. To go to the point about sometimes you recognize something that you've never experienced or something feels fundamentally like home, even though it's far away or unnatural. When you're in water, you're like, I'm meant for this.
Yeah.
And I think we are. The sensory deprivation element of swimming, the outsideness. I try to swim at Barton Springs in Austin like once a week. And you're just like, to know people have been doing it for 500 years in this place. There's one in San Antonio that people have been doing for thousands of years. It's the best.
I love being in water. It feels like it has a great impact on my nervous system. My whole body relaxes when it gets into water, even cold water. I like the feeling of being in water.
Yeah. Yeah. Barton Springs is always 71 degrees.
Wow.
Like I've been in it when it was like I swam in February. It was 26 degrees outside, 71 in the water.
Wow.
Let's say it was 100 a couple weeks ago, and it's 71 in the water because it's coming up.
How does that work?
It's millions of. So Barton Springs is this natural spring that they turned into a pool. It's kind of like those rock pools in Australia, right on the coast. It looks like that, but it's not near the ocean. It's in landlocked Austin, and so something like 20 million gallons of water comes up a day from deep into the earth. And it's so far down there, it's just always coming out at the same temperature. And it's so big. I mean, the pool is over an eighth of a mile long. So, and it's so deep. I mean, it's like 20 feet deep in some places that it doesn't matter the outside temperature. It doesn't change the water temperature. And so, yeah, you're swimming in this natural thing. There's turtles and fish and seaweed and seagrass in it. And you're just like, this is both a creation and somehow a raw bit of earth. And it's both an unnatural environment in that it's water and we're land animals. And you're like, this is where I was meant to be. I love it. Mm. Do you swim mostly in the ocean or do you swim in a pool?
Both.
There's something about being thrown around by the waves, I think, as you're swimming. Yeah, there's something magical about that too. Yeah,
I probably spend more time playing in the water in the ocean when there are waves. I don't focus on like going long distance in the ocean. If I'm swimming long distance, it's typically laps in a pool. But I like the feeling of playing in the waves.
And like, where else do adults do that? Like the ocean is one of the last areas that adults are allowed to be silly and play and be tossed around. Like it's very childlike, and it kind of probably takes you back to a childlike state where your mom or dad or uncle is throwing you around. There's a powerlessness that we submit to having in the ocean that you don't get even on a beautiful walk through a forest. The trees aren't bending down and knocking you over.
Well, and I've noticed this from living close to the beach, that people scream on the beach, scream with joy on the beach.
Yes.
And in most polite society, people do not scream. If people are screaming, something's really wrong. But to hear people scream, squeal with joy on a regular basis, you get that when you're at the beach.
A botanical garden is beautiful, but it culturally demands a kind of silence and a somberness that the ocean, we've decided all rules are off. And you can be ridiculous and loud and silly and noisy. That is probably probably deeply therapeutic.
Yeah. It's also probably why there's such a cool surf culture and there isn't such a cool botanical garden culture.
Yeah. Or maybe there is, and we're just ignoring how fun botanical gardening actually is for the people that are doing it. Well, this is amazing. I thought the new book is really cool, and I do hope you make a physical version of it, because it would be nice to sit there and be able to flip through it the same way that you can kind of infinite scroll through this thing.
Yeah, I'm going to press up a few hundred just for me and my friends. Also to experience what it's like as a book, because I've only experienced it as a website, and I like that experience, and I like the experience of interacting with the art. But I'd be curious to see how it feels in the hand.
Yeah, right. You might notice unintentionally emphasizing or de-emphasizing certain words or themes just by it being on the page, that, reading it on your phone versus reading it on a laptop versus reading it on one of those giant curved monitors. Each one of these mediums is going to change what you get out of it. And how lovely it is that is at its core, a 3,000-year-old bit of text that's still infinitely fresh and new.
Yeah, it feels that way. And it felt like that was one of the most exciting parts of putting so much attention on a joke project, was when the DAO got involved. The nature of the DAO is so serious and so profound that the hopes of coders connecting with the DAO, something that they might not be normally drawn to, seemed like a potentially powerful, helpful thing on the planet.
There's something interesting about the DAO too, where, so you read it and they're never saying what they're talking about. They're just like, it is, or this, right? They're not being clear. And yet you make some choices in your version where you make some specificity, right? I have another version that's actually on my bedside that I flip through, if I forget to bring another book with me before I go to sleep, called the Parents Stoicism. And it all it does is insert, kid or parent occasionally into the text.
Yeah.
And in seeing that, it suddenly takes this thousands of year old bit of general wisdom, and it makes it very specific parenting wisdom. And I see how these ideas apply to the bedtime that just didn't go well, or the commute I have tomorrow, or this behavior issue that my wife and I are struggling to solve. Suddenly, the Tao Te Ching becomes a parenting book.
Yes. It's also why most of the principles in the Creative Act came out of experimentation in the music studio, but the book purposely is not about music or relating it to music, because the principles go beyond music. They're a way of looking at the world, and the Tao is like that. The Tao is a way of looking at the world, and you can apply it to parenting. You could apply it to vibe coding. You could apply it to a lot of things. The wisdom is open enough to apply really to anything.
I forget what it might be in the Tao Te Ching, or it's some Eastern thinker, but it's this idea that might be Musashi, actually. I think it is Musashi. He said, once you know the way, you see it in everything.
Yeah.
From the specific, whether it's music or philosophy or parenting or whatever, once you kind of understand a truth or a framework, then you're able to apply it to all these different domains, and it becomes infinitely elastic despite its originatingly specific domain.
Yeah, it's true as well with spiritual traditions. If you examine different spiritual traditions, it seems like all of these different streams all go back to the same source. They're all, for the most part, telling the same story. It's the same wisdom, just in different forms.
If it's a truth, then at some level, they all boil down to it, right? There's no, oh, this is a Chinese truth, or this is an American truth, or a Stoic truth, or a Buddhist truth. If it's a truth, all the schools should independently discover it in their own way.
Yeah, they're all pointing to the same thing.
Yes.
Same is true with meditation. You know, there's many different ways to go about meditating. Once you engage in them, you realize they're all taking you to this same place. It's doing the same thing, just in different methods. And there might be different times in your life where one method is more helpful than another.
Yeah, it's the same process of looking at your thoughts or turning off your thoughts or being still, like that. It's like all the different traditions have their own word for sort of stillness, because it is the sort of fundamental human battle to get to this place that we know we need, and we recognize it when we have it, but it is so ephemeral and fleeting, and we all want more of it.
Yeah, and I would say in all cases, particularly in the Tao, but in all cases, it's about a humility and giving up control, really.
Yes.
Like letting go of the arrogance of control.
Yeah, look, the first task of the philosopher, Epictetus said, is to understand there's some things that are in your control and some things that are not in your control. And that seems really simple, but you can spend a whole lifetime wrestling with the truth of that. And then you read Confucius, or you read the Tao Te Ching, or you read stories about Buddha, or you read Hindu stuff, and you go, oh man, they're going, hey, this is the part of life that you control, and this is the part of life that you don't control. And it's focusing on the parts of life that you don't control that's the source of all your suffering and unhappiness. And it's like they're all saying the same thing. It's true for the religious traditions, and it's true. But I think the craziest part is, in the last 200 years, it's all confirmed by the psychology and psychiatry and the scientific stuff. It's not like a neuroscientist has discovered anything that fundamentally disproves what the Buddhists or the Stoics were talking about thousands of years ago. If the only thing they've done is add another layer of why this is the case.
Yeah. If anything, just the opposite. It's like the science eventually comes around to the 3,000-year-old idea. It's like, of course, there's a reason.
Yes.
If it's 3,000 years old and we still know about it, there's a reason.
Yeah.
There are probably other formations that are 3,000 years old that got lost over time for a reason.
Yeah. And you find that, actually Socrates said this better than the scientist who has proof of it could have ever actually said it. Or that Lao Tzu or any of that they didn't just get to the truth of it, but they expressed the essence of that truth so perfectly.
And perfectly for the time. Like in the 60s, Ram Dass wrote Be Here Now. It's ancient teachings, but it applied to the 60s and through now till now. And then in the 70s, there was Your Arms Are Too Short to Box with God. And then in the 80s, it was Eckhart Tolle and The Power of Now. And they're all saying the same thing, just for the culture, or your book's talking about Stoicism. It's like, it's ancient, but it's new and it's now, and you're interpreting it for today.
And you're just adding a new spin on, like with music, the same handful of tropes or chord combinations or styles, and some of those will get absorbed into the canon, and some will be forgotten. But we're all participating in this grand tradition. That's why I like when they call philosophy the great conversation, that it's this thing that we've just all been doing for as long as we've been here. Well, I think your book is a great, your first book, of course, is a great contribution to that. And I think this new one's for something that started as a joke, a nice little thing. And I'm so glad we pushed through on this. I think it was worth hitting record.
Cool. Thank you, sir.
All right. Well, I hope you feel better, and I'll talk to you again soon.
Great. Talk to you later.